Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
My name is Arthur. For my entire life, I believed my family was drowning in poverty. When I was 18 years old, my parents sat me down in our small, moldy apartment. They told me that our family business had completely failed. They said we had nothing left. "You are the oldest son, Arthur," my father said with a heavy sigh. "You need to drop out of university. You need to work to help us feed your younger brother and sister." I loved my family. I wanted to be a good son. So I gave up my dreams. I moved into a tiny, windowless basement room near the industrial district. I worked 3 jobs. During the day, I delivered heavy packages in the freezing rain. At night, I taught myself how to write computer code, taking cheap freelance programming jobs until 3 in the morning. I ate instant noodles every single day. I wore shoes with holes in the soles. Every month, I sent 90% of my income back to my parents. I thought I was paying for the school supplies of my brother. I thought I was buying warm winter coats for my sister. When I called them, my mother would always cry on the phone. "We are eating leftover bread today, Arthur," my mother would sob. "Please work harder. You are the only hope of this family." I pushed my body to the absolute limit. I did not know their tears were completely fake. 10 years passed. I was 28 years old. My body was constantly exhausted, but I managed to secretly earn a bachelor degree in computer science by studying online during my delivery breaks. I thought our financial situation was getting better. But one night my parents called me. My father sounded terrified. "Arthur, we made a terrible mistake," my father stammered. "I borrowed money from a dangerous underground loan shark to pay for the medical bills of your sister. The interest rate was massive. We now owe them $500,000. My heart completely stopped. $500,000. It was an impossible amount of money. They told me the loan shark would break their legs if they did not pay $5,000 every single month. "Please, Arthur, you have to save us," my mother cried through the phone. "You are our brave son. We will sell our blood if we have to, but you have to help us pay this debt." I was terrified for their safety. I took on a 4th job. I slept only 3 hours a night. I took every programming contract I could find. I sacrificed my health, my youth, and my soul to send them that money every month. I believed I was a shield, protecting my fragile family from the cruel world. I was completely blind to the truth. It was a cold Tuesday evening in November. I was walking home from my delivery job, completely soaked in the rain. I had exactly $10 left in my pocket. I stopped at a small convenience store to buy a cup of cheap coffee. On a sudden impulse, I used my last few dollars to buy a single lottery ticket. I walked back to my freezing basement room. I sat on my broken bed and checked the numbers on my phone. I looked at the screen. Then I looked at my ticket. Every single number matched. I blinked, I rubbed my tired eyes, I checked the numbers again, and again, and again. I had won the national jackpot. $50 million. I fell to my knees on the cold concrete floor. I screamed. I cried until my lungs burned. The endless years of suffering, the hunger, the freezing nights. It was all over. I did not think about buying a sports car or a luxury mansion. My very first thought was my parents. "I can save them," I whispered to myself, tears streaming down my face. "I can pay off the terrible loan shark. I can buy my mother a beautiful house. I can give my brother and sister a perfect future." I claimed the money anonymously the next morning. I was so excited to surprise them, but the universe had a different plan. I wanted to solve the biggest problem first. I wanted to free my parents from their fear. I looked at the bank transfer records my father had given me. Every month, I deposited the $5,000 debt payment into a specific corporate account belonging to a man named Victor Vance. My father told me Victor was a ruthless, violent criminal. I found the corporate address of Victor Vance in the financial district. I walked into the massive glass building, expecting to see a dark, dangerous office. Instead, I walked into a pristine, high-end wealth management firm. I approached the receptionist. "I am here to pay off the debt of my father," I said politely. "I need to see Mr. Victor Vance." The receptionist looked at my cheap, worn-out jacket with a confused expression. "Mr. Vance is a private wealth manager, sir," the receptionist replied. "He does not issue debts. He manages the investment portfolios of elite billionaires." I frowned. That cannot be right, I said. My father sends him $5,000 every month. The receptionist typed the name of my father into her computer. Her eyes widened. Ah, yes, your father is one of our top VIP clients, she said with a polite smile. But he does not owe us money. That $5,000 monthly transfer goes directly into the private trust fund of his youngest son. The world around me suddenly went completely silent. A trust fund? I did not understand. My brain refused to process the words. I slowly backed away from the desk and walked out of the building. I pulled out my phone and hired an elite private investigator. I gave him the name of my father. I paid him $10,000 for an immediate, deep background check. 4 hours later, the investigator sent a file to my email. I stood in the rain outside a massive, gated community in the wealthiest neighborhood of the city. I looked at the digital file on my phone. My parents did not live in a moldy apartment. They owned a massive logistics company worth $30 million. They had never been bankrupt. I walked past the security gate and found the address. It was a spectacular, 3-story mansion with white pillars and a perfectly manicured garden. I walked up to the large glass window of the living room. I hid in the shadows of the bushes and looked inside. The room was filled with warm, golden light. My mother, the woman who claimed she was eating leftover bread, was wearing a diamond necklace and pouring expensive champagne. My father was laughing loudly, handing a small velvet box to my younger brother. "Happy birthday, son," my father said warmly. "Here are the keys to your new Ferrari." My younger sister, wearing a beautiful designer dress, cheered and hugged my brother. "Do not crash this one," my sister laughed. My brother smiled arrogantly. "Do not worry," my brother replied. "Even if I crash it, our stupid older brother is still working 3 jobs to send us free money." My father chuckled, taking a sip of champagne. "Keep your voice down," my father said with a cruel smile. "The fortune teller said Arthur absorbs all the bad luck of this family. As long as he stays poor and suffers in the dirt, our wealth will continue to grow. He is just our golden scapegoat. Keep crying on the phone, and he will keep sending the checks." I stood in the freezing rain, watching the people I loved celebrate my suffering. I felt my heart physically break into 1,000 pieces inside my chest. They did not love me. They never did. I was just a superstitious battery, a slave they created to protect their own luxury. I did not kick the door down. I did not scream at them. The sorrow inside me burned away, leaving nothing but absolute freezing logic. I turned around and walked away from the mansion. I had $50 million in my bank account. I had a brilliant mind. I was not going to give them a single penny. I was going to disappear, build a machine that controlled the world, and watch their empire burn to the ground. With $4 million secured in an offshore account, I didn't waste a single second. I knew the timeline of the tech industry better than anyone alive. I didn't rent a fancy glass office. I rented a highly secure underground server farm on the outskirts of the city. I registered a ghost corporation through a proxy lawyer in Delaware. I called it Apex Intelligence. To the public, I was just a broke college dropout who had been kicked out by the wealthy Blackwood family. But in the shadows of that server room, I was writing the foundational code for a neural network that wouldn't be conceptualized by the rest of the world for another 7 years. "The architecture is stable," I whispered to myself, watching the green lines of code cascade down my monitors. "But to build an empire, I need an army. In my previous life, Oliver didn't just steal from me. He built his fake reputation by crushing other brilliant, introverted developers. He would steal their patents, tie them up in expensive lawsuits, and leave them bankrupt. It was time to steal his future victims before he even knew their names." Her name was Chloe Vance. In the original timeline, Chloe was a brilliant MIT graduate who created a revolutionary data compression algorithm. Oliver stole it, claimed she violated a non-compete clause, and ruined her career. She ended up working at a coffee shop, completely broken. Right now, in 2016, she was just a struggling grad student buried in student debt. I found her sitting alone in a cheap diner, typing furiously on an old, cracked laptop. I walked over and placed a sleek titanium briefcase on the table. "Who are you?" Chloe asked, pulling her laptop away defensively. "My name is Liam," I said, taking a seat across from her. "I know about the compression algorithm you're building, and I know the major tech firms are going to offer you pennies for it, and then steal the rights." Chloe's eyes widened in shock. "How do you know about my algorithm? It's not public yet." I didn't answer her question. I simply opened the briefcase. Inside were stacks of crisp $100 bills totaling exactly $500,000. "I am building a company that will control the future," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "I want you to be my lead engineer. This is your signing bonus. You keep 100% of your patent rights, but you license them exclusively to Apex Intelligence. Are you in?" Chloe stared at the money, then at my calm, unwavering expression. She slowly closed her laptop. "When do we start?" she asked. While I was quietly assembling a team of absolute geniuses in my underground server farm, Oliver Blackwood was panicking. He had promised the board of directors at Blackwood Enterprises a revolutionary AI algorithm. He thought I was bluffing when I said I deleted it. He spent a week hiring expensive data recovery experts to search my old dorm room laptop. They found absolutely nothing. "What do you mean it's gone?" Oliver screamed at his lead technician, throwing a glass paperweight against the wall of his luxury office. "Sir, the hard drive was completely wiped with military-grade encryption," the technician stammered. "There's no algorithm. We have nothing to present to the investors next month." Margaret Blackwood burst into the office, her face pale with stress. "Oliver, the investors are calling me," Margaret said frantically. "They're threatening to pull $50 million in funding if we don't show them a working prototype. You need to build it yourself. You're a genius, aren't you?" Oliver swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He wasn't a genius. He barely passed his computer science classes. He was a parasite who relied entirely on my brain. I will fix it, Mother," Oliver lied, his voice trembling. "I'll have a prototype ready." Oliver did the only thing a talentless fraud could do. He tried to buy his way out of the problem. He began secretly scouring the dark web and private tech forums, looking for independent developers selling advanced algorithms. He wanted to buy one anonymously and slap his own name on it. I knew he would do this. It was his exact pattern of behavior. So I had Chloe write a specific, highly advanced machine learning program. To the untrained eye, it looked like a flawless, revolutionary financial prediction model. It was exactly what Oliver needed. But buried deep within millions of lines of code, I embedded a dormant logic bomb. I called it the Icarus Protocol, using a fake IP address and an anonymous broker. I listed the algorithm on the exact dark web forum I knew Oliver's fixers were monitoring. "Are you sure about this, Liam?" Chloe asked as we watched the listing go live from our server room. "If he figures out the code is rigged, he'll trace it back to the broker. He won't figure it out." I smiled coldly, taking a sip of coffee. "Oliver doesn't read code, he just reads price tags, and I just put a $10 million price tag on his coffin." 3 days later, my anonymous broker received an urgent, encrypted message. The buyer offered $12 million in untraceable cryptocurrency for the exclusive, total rights to the algorithm, demanding that all previous copies be destroyed. It was Oliver, he was desperate. I authorized the transfer. The $12 million hit my offshore accounts in minutes. I had just used Oliver's own corporate funds to finance my company, and in return, I handed him a loaded gun pointed directly at his own head. At Blackwood Enterprises, Oliver downloaded the massive file onto his secure servers. He ran a basic diagnostic. The system booted up perfectly, displaying complex, beautiful data models. Oliver let out a massive sigh of relief, leaning back in his leather chair with a triumphant smirk. "I don't need you, Liam," Oliver whispered to himself, completely convinced of his own superiority. "I always win." He immediately called his mother. "Mom, tell the board of directors to invite the press. I have the prototype, it's flawless." In my underground server room, a small green light blinked on my master monitor. It confirmed that the Icarus Protocol had been successfully installed inside the Blackwood corporate mainframe. Oliver thought he had just bought his salvation. He didn't know he had just brought the Trojan horse inside the gates. The press conference at Blackwood Enterprises was a media spectacle. Oliver stood on a brightly lit stage in front of hundreds of journalists, tech bloggers, and wealthy Wall Street investors. Behind him, a massive LED screen displayed the sleek, pulsating interface of the algorithm I had sold him. "Ladies and gentlemen, the future of financial modeling is here," Oliver announced into the microphone, flashing his charismatic, practiced smile. "I present to you the Blackwood Matrix, an artificial intelligence so advanced it can predict market fluctuations with 99% accuracy." Margaret Blackwood sat in the front row, wearing a custom Chanel suit, clapping enthusiastically. She looked at her biological son with pure pride. Oliver ran the live demonstration. The algorithm digested 10 years of historical stock data in seconds and spit out perfect, highly profitable trading models. The crowd erupted into applause. The investors were practically drooling. Within 24 hours of the presentation, Blackwood Enterprises' stock price skyrocketed by 40%. Oliver was featured on the cover of Forbes magazine, labeled as the new prince of Silicon Valley. They were drowning in stolen glory. They believed they were invincible. But they didn't know that every single line of code they were celebrating was quietly wrapping a digital noose around their empire. While Oliver was busy taking photos for magazines, I was operating in the absolute dark. Inside the underground server farm, Chloe and my newly assembled team of elite engineers were working around the clock. We weren't building fake prediction models. We were building Aegis, an autonomous, self-evolving cybersecurity protocol designed to protect institutional banking mainframes. It was a masterpiece. In my previous life, it took the world 7 years to invent it. I built it in 6 months. I didn't hold press conferences. I sent anonymous, encrypted demonstrations to the top 5 banks in the world. When their elite cyber defense teams tried to hack my Aegis protocol, it didn't just block them. It traced their IPs, locked them out of their own systems, and sent them a polite welcome message. The banks were terrified and desperate to buy it. Within 2 weeks, Apex Intelligence signed exclusive multi-billion-dollar licensing contracts with all 5 banks. Overnight, my ghost company achieved a private valuation of $20 billion. "We did it, Liam," Chloe said, staring at the bank transfer confirmations on her monitor, her voice shaking with disbelief. "We're the most powerful private tech firm in the country. We are just getting started," I replied calmly, adjusting the cuffs of my shirt. "It is time to step out of the shadows, get my tailor on the phone. I need a suit." Back at Blackwood Enterprises, Oliver's arrogance was reaching critical mass. The board of directors was thrilled with the stock bump, but they wanted more. They wanted to transition the company from a traditional tech firm into an autonomous hedge fund. They wanted Oliver to plug the Blackwood matrix directly into their live, leveraged trading accounts. "Are you sure the system can handle billions of dollars in live trading, Oliver?" the chairman of the board asked during a private meeting. "A glitch could bankrupt us." Oliver scoffed, offended by the question. "I wrote the base code myself, Chairman. It is flawless. Connect the accounts. Let the machine make us billionaires." He authorized the integration. The IT department connected the Blackwood corporate treasury, holding nearly $3 billion of liquid capital and leveraged debt, directly into the algorithm. In my secure office across the city, my phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen. A single automated text message had arrived from my hidden server. "Icarus Protocol, armed and awaiting threshold." The trap was fully loaded. Oliver had literally handed the detonator to me. Every year, the tech industry hosted the Silicon Summit Gala in San Francisco. It was the most exclusive, high-society event for billionaires, venture capitalists, and industry titans. This year, everyone was buzzing with a single rumor. The mysterious, anonymous founder of Apex Intelligence was finally going to make his first public appearance. Oliver and Margaret arrived at the gala in a chauffeur-driven Maybach. They walked the red carpet like royalty. Photographers flashed their cameras as Oliver posed, acting like he owned the entire room. I arrived 30 minutes later. I didn't take a limousine. I drove myself in a sleek, matte black Aston Martin. I wore a custom-tailored midnight blue tuxedo. I looked entirely different from the stressed, exhausted college student they had kicked out 6 months ago. My posture was straight. My eyes were cold. And I radiated the absolute, terrifying confidence of a man who held the world in his hands. I walked into the grand ballroom. The room was filled with hundreds of the wealthiest people on the planet. And standing right by the champagne tower, laughing loudly with a group of investors, was Oliver Blackwood. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and walked directly toward them. Margaret saw me first. Her laughter abruptly stopped. The color drained from her face and her designer champagne flute slipped slightly in her hand. She nudged Oliver violently. Oliver turned around. When he saw me, his jaw dropped in sheer, unadulterated shock. "Liam," Oliver hissed, quickly stepping forward to block me from his investors. "What the hell are you doing here? How did you get past security? This is an elite gala, you pathetic street rat. Get out before I call the police." I took a slow sip of my champagne, looking at him with mild amusement. "Hello, Oliver, Margaret," I said smoothly, my voice calm and perfectly leveled. "You both look stressed. Is the algorithm giving you trouble?" "My algorithm is flawless. Oliver snarled quietly, his face turning red with anger. "You're just jealous because you're a failure. I told you to stay away from my family." Suddenly, the grand speakers in the ballroom chimed. The host of the gala stepped up to the main microphone on the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice echoing across the silent room. "Please direct your attention to the center of the room. We are incredibly honored to welcome the visionary who is reshaping global cybersecurity. Please welcome the chairman and CEO of Apex Intelligence, Mr. Liam Blackwood." The spotlight swung across the dark ballroom. It didn't hit Oliver. It hit me. The entire ballroom erupted into deafening applause. The billionaire investors surrounding Oliver immediately pushed past him, eagerly reaching out to shake my hand. Oliver froze completely. His eyes were wide with a terror he couldn't comprehend. Margaret covered her mouth with her hand, her knees visibly buckling as the horrifying reality crashed down on her. The useless street rat they had discarded wasn't just wealthy. He was the king of the room. I looked at Oliver, who was trembling in the shadow of my spotlight. I raised my champagne glass to him and offered a razor-sharp, chilling smile. The execution had officially begun. The rest of the Silicon Summit Gala was a living nightmare for Oliver and Margaret. Every single major investor, bank CEO, and tech journalist completely ignored them to crowd around me. I spent the evening discussing high-level cryptography and global finance with the most powerful men in the world. Oliver stood in the corner of the room, clutching his champagne glass so tightly it almost cracked. "How did he do it, Mother?" Oliver whispered frantically, his chest heaving with panic. "He was broke 6 months ago. How did he build a $20 billion company?" Margaret bit her lip, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "He must have stolen something, Oliver. A street rat doesn't just become a titan overnight. We need to look into his company. We need to find his weakness and crush him before he comes for us." "He is not coming for us," Oliver snapped, trying to rebuild his fragile ego. "He builds firewalls. I built a predictive trading AI. My company is still growing. Once the Matrix algorithm doubles our corporate treasury this quarter, Blackwood Enterprises will buy his little startup and fire him again." They were desperately trying to convince themselves they were still in control. They didn't realize they were standing in a burning building, admiring the warmth of the fire. The next morning, I was sitting in my secure, glass-enclosed office at the new Apex Intelligence headquarters. Chloe walked in, holding a tablet. "Liam, you have an urgent meeting request," Chloe said, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "It's the chairman of the board for Blackwood Enterprises. He wants a private lunch with you." I smiled. The board of directors at Oliver's company wasn't stupid. They saw the shift in power at the gala, and they wanted to know what I was planning. "Tell him I don't do lunches," I replied calmly. "Tell him I will give him exactly 10 minutes in my office today at 3 o'clock. At exactly 3 o'clock, the chairman, an older, ruthless businessman named Arthur Sterling, walked into my office. He looked around at my state-of-the-art security setup with clear respect. "Mr. Blackwood," Sterling said, taking a seat, "I will get straight to the point. The board is concerned about your sudden rise. We know Margaret kicked you out. We want to know if Apex Intelligence plans to launch a hostile takeover of Blackwood Enterprises as an act of revenge." I leaned back in my chair, looking at him with absolute cold clarity. "I have no interest in buying your company, Chairman," I stated smoothly. "A hostile takeover implies your company has value. I don't buy sinking ships." Sterling frowned. "Sinking ship? Oliver's algorithm is generating a 40% return on our live trading accounts right now." "Oliver doesn't know how to code, Chairman," I said softly, sliding a thick file across the desk. "He bought that algorithm off the dark web. I have the blockchain transaction receipts to prove it, and whoever sold it to him might have left a backdoor open." Sterling opened the file. As he read the irrefutable proof of Oliver's fraud, his face turned the color of ash. Sterling rushed back to the Blackwood Enterprises headquarters in an absolute panic. He immediately called an emergency board meeting. "Shut it down," Sterling roared at Oliver in front of the entire board of directors. "Shut the algorithm down right now. Disconnect the corporate treasury from the live servers." "What are you talking about?" Oliver yelled defensively, his face red. "It's making us millions. You bought it off a black market broker, you stupid fraud," Sterling screamed, throwing the file of receipts onto the boardroom table. "Liam Blackwood gave me the proof. We have no idea what that code is actually doing. Cut the connection before we lose everything." Oliver froze, the room spun around him. Liam knew. Desperate to save himself, Oliver frantically typed the kill command into his master terminal to disconnect the AI from the live market. But it was too late. The moment Oliver initiated the manual override, the dormant logic bomb recognized the threat. In my office across the city, Chloe looked up from her monitor, her eyes wide. "Liam," the Icarus protocol just engaged. "Let it burn," I whispered, watching my own screen. Inside the Blackwood boardroom, the giant digital screens displaying the company's live portfolio violently flickered. Oliver pounded on his keyboard, but the system locked him out. A bright red warning flashed across his monitor. Manual override denied. Predictive inversion engaged. "What is happening?" Margaret screamed, rushing into the boardroom as alarms began to blare. "It won't let me in," Oliver shrieked, his voice cracking in sheer terror. The algorithm, which had been perfectly predicting market trends to make them money, instantly inverted its logic. With the speed of light, it took the entire $3 billion corporate treasury and began executing the absolute worst possible trades at maximum margin leverage. It shorted stocks that were skyrocketing. It aggressively bought massive positions in collapsing industries. The soft green numbers on the giant screens instantly turned a harsh, bleeding red. $500, 000,000. The board of directors began shouting hysterically. One executive grabbed his chest, gasping for air. $1, 200, 000,000. "Pull the plug," Sterling roared, physically grabbing Oliver and throwing him out of his chair. "Cut the server power." The IT director sprinted into the server room and literally hacked the power cables with an axe. The massive screens in the boardroom finally went black. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was panting, staring at the dead monitors. Sterling pulled out his phone and called the clearinghouse to get the final damage report. He listened for 30 seconds, his face completely devoid of life. He dropped his phone onto the table. "We didn't just lose the $3 billion, Sterling whispered, his voice hollow. "The algorithm used maximum leverage. We are $1 billion in debt. We are completely bankrupt." The collapse of Blackwood Enterprises was the fastest corporate death in Wall Street history, because the algorithm was registered under Oliver's name. The SEC and the FBI immediately launched a massive criminal investigation for gross algorithmic negligence and market manipulation. Oliver and Margaret were trapped in the boardroom, surrounded by furious executives and federal agents swarming the building. "It was Liam," Oliver screamed hysterically, tears streaming down his face as 2 FBI agents grabbed his arms. "He set me up. He sold me the code. You signed the patent documents swearing you built it from scratch, Mr. Blackwood," the lead FBI agent said coldly, snapping the heavy steel handcuffs onto Oliver's wrists. "You are under arrest for federal securities fraud." Margaret fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The empire she had built on lies and stolen genius was completely incinerated in a matter of minutes. She watched the police drag her golden son out of the boardroom in handcuffs. I stood by the window in my penthouse office, watching the live news coverage of the FBI raid on Blackwood Enterprises. I didn't smile, I just took a sip of my coffee. The poison they fed me in my previous life had finally been purged from my system. But I wasn't finished. I wanted to look them in the eyes one last time. The federal detention center was cold and unforgiving. Oliver wore a bright orange jumpsuit. He sat on a thin mattress in a concrete cell, staring blankly at the metal bars. The charismatic tech visionary was completely gone. He was replaced by a terrified, broken criminal facing 20 years in federal prison. Across the city, the situation for Margaret was equally devastating, because Oliver had used the family estate and the personal bank accounts of his mother to secure the margin loans for the corporate treasury. The federal government seized absolutely everything. Federal marshals arrived at the grand mansion of the Blackwood family. They ordered Margaret to leave the premises immediately. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching a single designer handbag, watching the government lock the iron gates of her $30 million home. "I do not understand," Margaret sobbed, speaking to her lawyer on a cheap burner phone. "We were billionaires yesterday. How can I be homeless today?" "Your son committed massive securities fraud," her lawyer replied coldly. "The federal prosecutors froze all assets to pay the massive debt. You have $0 to your name, Margaret. Do not call me again." The lawyer hung up. Margaret stood alone on the street. The elite friends who used to drink champagne with her did not offer her a place to stay. They treated her like a disease. She was completely abandoned. 1 month later, The federal bankruptcy court held a public auction to liquidate the remaining assets of the ruined company. I attended the auction in person, wearing a tailored black suit. I sat in the front row. The main asset up for sale was the massive glass skyscraper that used to be the headquarters of the Blackwood Empire. The starting bid was $50 million. I raised my paddle. $50 million, I said calmly. The auctioneer looked around the room. None of the other tech billionaires or real estate moguls raised their paddles. They knew I was the one who destroyed Oliver. They were absolutely terrified of me. Nobody dared to bid against the chairman of Apex Intelligence. Sold to Apex Intelligence for $50 million, the auctioneer announced, slamming his wooden gavel. I bought their entire corporate legacy for pennies. I did not move my team into their building. The next day, I hired a massive demolition crew. I stood across the street, drinking a cup of dark coffee, and watched the bulldozers tear the glass skyscraper down to the ground. I erased their physical presence from the skyline of the city. I turned their monument of arrogance into a flat, empty parking lot. Before the final sentencing of Oliver, I used my immense wealth and high-level government connections to arrange a private visitation in the federal prison. I walked into the sterile interrogation room. Oliver was brought in by 2 heavy guards. He was shackled at the wrists and ankles. He sat down across from me. He looked thin, pale, and completely defeated. "Have you come to gloat, Liam?" Oliver whispered, his voice trembling with exhausted rage. "You won, you stole my company, you ruined my life." I leaned back in the metal chair, looking into his hollow eyes. "I did not steal anything, Oliver," I replied softly. "You destroyed yourself. You bought a weapon you did not understand, and you pointed it at your own head." Oliver clenched his shackled fists. "Why did you do it?" Oliver cried desperately. "We gave you a home. We fed you. Why did you hate us so much that you built a $20 billion empire just to crush me?" I leaned forward, resting my arms on the cold steel table. "I am going to tell you a secret, Oliver. A secret that will haunt you for the rest of your miserable life in this cage." I looked dead into his terrified eyes. "You gave me a glass of expensive red wine to celebrate the transfer of my artificial intelligence patents," I whispered, watching the blood drain from his face. "But the wine was poisoned. I died on the marble floor while you and Margaret watched." Oliver gasped, physically recoiling in his chair. "That is impossible," Oliver stammered, shaking his head frantically. "I never gave you wine. I never poisoned you. You are insane." "In this timeline, you did not," I said, my voice dropping to a freezing, absolute zero. "But in another life, you murdered me to steal my genius. The universe sent me back 10 years to correct the equation. I am the ghost of the man you killed." Oliver stared at me, his mind completely shattering. He realized the sheer, supernatural magnitude of the vengeance that had crushed him. He screamed, clutching his head, rocking back and forth in pure madness. I stood up, adjusted my suit jacket, and walked out of the room, leaving him to drown in his eternal nightmare. Winter arrived, covering the city in thick, freezing snow. I was driving my armored Aston Martin through the downtown district. I stopped at a red light near a crowded subway station. I looked out the window. Sitting on a piece of cardboard near the subway entrance was an old, freezing woman. She was wearing layers of dirty, torn clothes. She was holding a plastic cup, begging for spare change. It was Margaret, the woman who used to wear diamonds and look down on the poor, was now begging for pennies in the freezing wind. I rolled down the window of my luxury car. I took a crisp $100 bill from my wallet. I held it out the window. Margaret looked up. Her eyes were red and tired. She saw the expensive car. Then she saw my face. She froze completely. Her trembling hand stopped reaching for the money. "You called me a street rat, Margaret," I said calmly, the freezing wind blowing between us. "You said you only adopted me to use my brain. Look at us now." I dropped the $100 bill onto the wet snow at her feet. "Buy yourself something warm," I added softly. I rolled the window up. The traffic light turned green. I drove away, leaving the beggar queen kneeling in the slush, weeping bitterly over the single bill I threw at her. It was a quiet Friday evening at the new global headquarters of Apex Intelligence. The massive server rooms were humming perfectly. Chloe and my team of elite engineers had just secured the digital infrastructure for the national power grid. We were no longer just a cybersecurity company. We were the silent guardians of the modern world. I stood in my massive penthouse office, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The city lights glowed brightly against the dark night sky. I did not have an adoptive family anymore. I did not have a tragic past. I had entirely rewritten the code of my own life. I had taken the poison they meant for me, and I turned it into an antidote that cured my destiny. My secure phone vibrated on the glass desk. It was a message from Chloe. "The global servers are stable, Liam. Have a good weekend," the message read. I smiled. I turned off the main office lights, leaving only the soft blue glow of the server monitors. The second chance was complete. The past was dead. The architect of tomorrow walked out into the light, completely untouchable, ready to build a future they could never steal.
I walk through fire in disguise, buried truth beneath their lies. But every scar became my code. Now I won't break, I just reload. The past won't hold me anymore. I'm not who I was before. From shadows I have found my name, a second chance, a brighter flame.